possible by the Zicklin School of Business at Baruch College, CUNY.
If you have the misfortune of being sick, you want to think that your doctor is focused solely on giving you the best treatment available. But of course, nothing about the healthcare industry is that simple anymore. Insurance companies, drug salesmen, and government programs can also wield considerable influence over your treatment plan. How do doctors and hospitals handle these pressures? What ethical dilemmas do they face? I'm Sarah Bartlett, and I'll be discussing these and other issues today on USA Inc. Joining us today is Dr. Herbert Pardes, the President and CEO of New York Presbyterian Hospital, one of the nation's leading healthcare providers. Dr. Pardes has spent many years as a physician, an educator, and now as a senior hospital executive, making him the perfect guest. Dr. Pardes, thank you for joining us.
Nice to be with you.
The first question I wanted to talk to you about was the whole economics of the healthcare industry. It seems to me that there's enormous financial pressure now on doctors in particular. Can you talk a little bit about what's been going on there?
Sure. I think on the one hand, healthcare has an enormous amount it can do today. It can help and can cure and can treat much more than it ever could 30, 40 years ago. As a result, many more people want it. Many people come for services, and so the pressure for healthcare is very great. At the same time, the very sophistication that we've developed costs money. It means specialists, it means technology, it means all kinds of resources to be able to undertake that. And the nation's overall healthcare costs have been going up at a rather steep rate. In the face of that, most physicians and hospitals are finding that their revenue increases are going up at very modest levels. Their expense increases are going up at much greater levels. And so each year they're confronted with how to handle that deficit. This is creating an overwhelming problem for many institutions and many physicians.
I guess the thing that worries me the most about that is that it creates the recipe for people who might want to cut corners to try to reduce some of their costs or increase some of their revenues. Obviously, most doctors are highly ethical individuals and they're in this business for all the right reasons. But at the margin, just as we've seen with some other industries recently, particularly on Wall Street, it does seem to me to leave open the potential for some abuse. Are you aware of any issues?
Well, I would say, first of all, that you're quite right that most people who go into medicine and healthcare are driven by the exciting mission of helping other people. There's nothing that feels better. It is a sensational experience to have somebody come to you in pain or in fear or with a great threat from an illness, and you can help them with it. That's what drives 99% of people. You're quite right, though. There are always going to be bad eggs. The hospital has dismissed a number of people when we thought they've functioned in an unacceptable way. Now, there are good things one can do to find efficiencies, to try to make the healthcare system more effective, more productive. There are, for example, in our own institution, a number of projects we're working on to try to make the flow of people through the hospital expedited. That means we can take care of a larger number of people in the course of a year. And I'll tell you something, with the baby boomer generation coming along, the demand for health services is going to be enormous. I mean, just reflect for a moment what healthcare can do. About 30 years ago, we could save 5% of children with cancer. Today, we can save 60%. At about the same time, most children died of congenital heart disease. Today, almost all are saved. Heart disease has radically changed. When President Eisenhower had his heart attack, he was out 7 weeks. When Vice President Cheney had his heart trouble, he was back in the office within about 2 or 3 days. Those are the exciting things that healthcare can do. Now, given that fact, larger number of people are treatable, larger number of people are living longer lives, larger number of people are coming. As a result, the demand and the cost overall for the country goes up rather substantially. Having said that, then all of us in healthcare, no matter how much we're dedicated to the patient and the mission, and we are, have to also make sure we're as fiscally effective, responsible as possible, in an ethical way. There are people who, as you say, will be the outliers. We would hope they would be exceptional, and certainly when we become aware of it, we try to bring that back into compliance immediately.
Well, some of the outliers, as you said, seem to me to involve the way that the drug companies have been interacting with physicians. I'm particularly concerned, I think New York State Attorney General Eliot Spitzer brought a suit against 3 different pharmaceutical companies last year, alleging that they were basically manipulating the prices of drugs. They were telling government programs like Medicare and insurance companies a drug costs such and such a price, and then offering discounts to doctors who were dispensing those drugs. The doctors were essentially pocketing the difference, and I think they rationalized it by saying, well, we have so many other costs to cover, we need this to make ourselves whole. What should a doctor do when they're faced with an offer like that from a drug company?
A doctor trying to make money on that kind of arrangement should simply not be doing it. I will tell you that one of the things we've done is we've put in place at New York Presbyterian a relatively strict policy with regard to people who represent pharmaceutical companies and want to be in the hospital. We do not let them have any interaction with our trainees. We insist that they register. They have to be identified. We pretty much ride a tough herd on how they can function. And as a matter of fact, I think we were one of several hospitals in a story that the New York Times just had cited as having put in place a rather strong policy. On the one hand, it is valuable for doctors to be as informed as possible. On the other hand, they've got to watch, because if you've got people who have who are working for a given drug company, they have a point of view, and that has to be appreciated. So we want our doctors, both the young ones, to not have unnecessary contact with those agents, and the people who are the attendings, that they interact with them in a way that has some ground rules.
But isn't it sometimes very fuzzy? I mean, I can imagine a situation where there's a drug salesman, they're selling a drug that you happen to think is a terrific drug as a doctor, a very legitimate product. This person is offering to entertain you, take you out to a 5-star restaurant, bring your wife, and you think, well, what's so wrong about that? And gradually a relationship develops, and it can lead to other forms of entertainment and trips. I mean, I've heard all kinds of stories in this profession. How do you restrict that?
Those are well-taken concerns, but physicians now who go through medical school have ethical training. We have regular courses on ethics, and we deal with these issues. A number of the physicians themselves often raise the issues for general consideration. So, listen, people can offer you possibilities which you know are inherently unacceptable. And I believe that most of the people who come out of medical schools and who are physicians are concerned about how they handle themselves. And when they're in an institution, the institution tries to make sure that there's a point of view which is generally promulgated. And if people can't comply with that, we are not reluctant to simply dismiss the doctor.
Mm-hmm. Is most of the ethical training and sort of supervision or oversight, is that coming through the hospitals? I mean, I think about how things work in corporate America. For example, you have boards of trustees, you have human relations departments. I mean, if you're a single practitioner, where are you going to get your guidance from, your supervision?
Well, first of all, you have, the medical schools do include ethics training in the medical school education. Then in addition, hospitals such as ours have designated ethics experts who convene committees and discussions, because the range of ethical issues is enormously broad. We're focusing right now on, if you will, some of the business-related issues. There are a whole host of issues in the human life and how does one handle clinical medicine. So ethics is a very important part of medicine. And as in any profession, there are going to be people who are going to bend the rules, and what we have to do is both give them the best education, make sure that those issues are right out front and discussed, and again, as I said, act if we feel somebody simply can't conform to reasonable ethical procedures. Our expectation is that the number one considerations, how do you do the best for your patient?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier that medicine had gotten more complicated. That one should not be complicated. We are here for one thing primarily, to help patients and to respond to the families who are also secondarily impacted by the illness.
But I mean, not to overcomplicate it, it just seems that if you're a doctor and your cost structure is getting further and further out of whack, you're going to have to consider taking some steps to protect your practice, even if it means a slight compromise in some of your options. Let me give you an example. The whole issue of referrals to specialists. I was reading a very interesting piece in the Wall Street Journal about how cardiologists and surgeons are forming under sort of an umbrella group, and that way they can share some of the revenue. It means that they're constantly referring to that same group of surgeons, and the surgeons are helping to cover the costs of the practice. That means that they're restricted to some degree in who they refer their patients to, but it's the best way that they can figure out to run their business properly. Does that seem to be ethical from your standpoint?
That was a kind of complicated question,
Yeah.
so let me kind of take it apart a little
Okay.
bit. In referring a patient, your prime consideration should be who is what's an excellent physician or the best physician to take care of that particular problem. In my experience, high-quality physicians are very intent on referring to high-quality physicians. And that's well taken because healthcare is much more multidisciplinary than it was before. You usually are just not dealing with one doctor. You'll see an internist, they'll have to send you to a surgeon. They may need to have a referral, a consultation from a neurologist. So when I advise anybody about healthcare, I say, get a quality doctor to start with and ask them to get you quality doctors in like. If doctors band together in some kind of group practice, and therefore they're seeing one and they're joined, and therefore they say, I want you to see my colleague because there's a second question, my feeling is that's probably within the arena of legitimacy. There are rules, again, on inappropriate returns from people to whom patients are referred for the referral. The emphasis should be on the patient's welfare. Are there people who violate that? As you say, probably there are. Medical societies, medical institutions are there to promulgate best behaviors. Now, one other thing, however, that you're saying, which I think is important to emphasize.
Let me just interrupt here, because
Yeah.
I do want to take a break, and we'll continue this afterwards. Thank you.
The Zicklin School of Business at Baruch College of the City University of New York is the largest and most diverse accredited business school in the United States, offering high-quality, full-time and part-time degree programs at the undergraduate, master's, and PhD levels. For information about the Zicklin School of Business, please visit our website, zicklin.baruch.cuny.edu. That's zicklin.baruch.cuny.edu.
Welcome back. My guest today is Dr. Herbert Pardes, President and CEO of New York Presbyterian Hospital. I'm afraid I cut you off there. What were you about to tell us?
There are responsible ways, given the pressures economically on healthcare institutions and physicians, of making your enterprise more fiscally effective. One of the things I'm most excited about is the use of information technology. We're moving toward systems which allow doctors to put in drug orders in the hospital just through a computer, eliminating all the handwriting, eliminating a number of the middle people. So today, in many of our hospitals, doctor can walk in, goes to the computer, gives a set of directions. The next people to pick up those directions are radiologists, pharmacists, nurses, who are asked to do X, Y, and Z. That replaced the handwriting which went from one person to another person, often ill understood. What's the value? First of all, in terms of our concern about finances, it's less costly. You need less people involved. Number two, very important also, we want to reduce the number of possible errors. That's one example, but there are a host of similar examples, and the best of hospital administrators and people who are looking for ways to responsibly conduct their health care in a less costly way are seeking all kinds of constructive solutions like that.
I've noticed on TV and radio in this market, hospitals advertising more and more. It seems like everywhere I turn, there's somebody telling me I should go to Mount Sinai or St. Vincent's or whatever. What is that all about? Is that simply to improve your revenue stream? And I mean, does that trouble you at all, that you're having to sort of sell your services that way?
Well, it was, I would say, about 10 to 12 years ago when this started. And at first, many people in healthcare were not inclined to have that kind of marketing out there. Whether good or bad, it is now universal. And there is competition with regard to programs, activity, and the like. And so you're seeing a lot of institutions trying to persuade potential consumers that they're the place to go. You can argue that's good or bad. Is it money that could be spent elsewhere? Perhaps, but for almost every institution, it's so widespread and so universal that it's impossible not to participate.
One of the hot buttons these days is the whole issue of outsourcing and increasingly even offshore. And I was fascinated to read that now in the radiology area, some people are sending their scans to places like India to have them read, and then I guess some of the analysis is done back here as well. But are you doing any of that at your hospital, and how do you feel about that trend?
I'll tell you a way where we're doing something which I think makes sense, and there's a certain similarity to it. And that is, for example, we have major academic institutions and we have small community hospitals. And rather than replicating or duplicating certain expertise in the small community hospital, we use telepathology. In other words, we can take a slide, let's say somebody's doing an operation, we can take a slide there, have that image sent back home to home base, and an expert pathologist will read it so that the community hospital does not have to recruit another pathologist. That's a good way of saving, and it's within our own system. If one does that kind of thing, which is outsource for expert opinion, that would be something we would be reluctant to use. We think we've got very good experts. And also, one of the things I do want people to know is that we directly oversee the people who make the medical judgments at New York Presbyterian, and so you're getting the highest quality. There may be very high quality also for places who do the kind of thing you're talking about. I haven't heard a lot about that, but our own feeling is we'd prefer to know who's doing our clinical work, and therefore we can speak for them. But on the other hand, the excitement, this is now telemedicine, information technology, is we're doing all kinds of things. Let me give you another example of something we're doing. We have a telemedicine project for diabetes, and what we're doing is we can have a nurse just get on the television, a television camera, with a patient, and within a few minutes do a checkup on the diabetic patient, saves the patient coming into the hospital, saves work on the part of the hospital staff, and we are doing that with patients all around New York State. That's a major demonstration, and our hope is that it will be used more widely. So the point is, you can use techniques to legitimately and responsibly cut costs out of healthcare.
Well, all those trends seem to be hugely important, particularly for the hospitals that are under so much financial pressure right now. Is there any sense of reallocating the physical location of things? For example, I've heard of ERs that have been sort of shipped off the campus, if you will, so that they're not in a non-for-profit environment and they can afford to charge differently and not be subject to the same restrictions. Have you had to do any of that? Have you thought about?
We've had nothing like that. I mean, we try to be as imaginative as possible. I can give you multiple examples. Mm-hmm. One of the things an academic health center tries to do is be imaginative. So let me give you another example of a technology. We now have the ability to watch 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days a week, people in the intensive care unit. In doing that, we have doctors or nurses who are watching that constantly. They will pick up a problem very early. And so rather than allowing a complication to develop, they interrupt it, get the nurse and doctor at that site to the patient immediately. And therefore, we reduce serious complications and, again, reduce all kinds of unnecessary health care. I'll tell you another kind of thing which I think is important for the whole system. and for people themselves that are taking care of themselves. And that is the phenomenon of early identification. You take a disease like colon cancer. If you really check with your doctor, what is your risk for that? Relatively young in your life. And you then responsibly make sure you get colonoscopies, your likelihood of getting that disease plummets. Take a person with diabetes. If they take care of themselves in terms of diet, take care of themselves in terms of medications, the likelihood of complications drops. Those complications are what's really costly. The person who waits too long to go for medical care, that's when it really becomes costly, and often what would have been unnecessary costs and dollars are expended when they could be used elsewhere.
But just to play devil's advocate, you do hear a lot of people saying, I tried to get my doctor to give me this test or that test, and he said the insurance won't cover it, and I don't fit the profile, and therefore I wasn't able to get, what I wanted. I mean, I think a lot of patients do go in hoping that the doctors will be more aggressive, and they feel that their doctors have their hands tied by some of the policies that they're dealing with.
Well, that's, as like all human phenomena, that's multi-determined. There are some people who may be asking for tests, and really the tests are excessive. So one doesn't want to simply willy-nilly do all kinds of tests. Number two, I think a responsible physician, if they've got a test they think should be done, will be a strong advocate to get that test done one way or the other.
But is it always so clear-cut? I mean, it seems to me that there've got to be a lot of areas where it's gray, and the doctor has to say, well, I can see your point, but all I can see is the insurance company, giving me grief for having suggested that you do this.
Well, I'll give you examples where I think doctors should not respond. For example, people come in with viral diseases and want antibiotics. Often antibiotics are inappropriate. I think the doctor has to resist, and it may make some people angry, but the doctor is doing the right thing. On the other hand, the doctor will often, and I have many doctor friends who go to bat and have discussions with the managed care companies if there's a disagreement about whether a test is appropriate or not. If a patient comes in, I guess you have to give me a specific example, and say...
Well, colonoscopy was what I was thinking of, because I think there are some people who may be borderline to have that test, and yet you may think it's really a useful thing to do.
I think if a doctor had a patient who had a colonoscopy, that doctor would want to advocate absolutely tenaciously to get that done. Because I think colonoscopies done at the right times in reasonable time frames are enormously valuable in reducing the incidence of colon cancer.
Well, clearly. I mean, I think it seems to me that it's just another example of how doctors have to constantly make ethical decisions. Now, you mentioned that they get a lot of training in medical school. Can you tell us anything about that? I mean, is it right up there with some of the other courses that they take, or is it just paid lip service to?
No, I don't think it's lip service at all. I think a lot of doctors, most doctors, really value their commitment to a patient. And once you say that, they're advocates. There is nothing that gives them greater pleasure than taking care of a patient the right way. And so many of them raise the questions themselves. If you take a look, or if you want to spend some time with some of the students coming into our medical schools, I think you'd be delighted. They're a wonderful group of people. This is not exactly a field where people, gain great power or renown, or this is not a big money-making field. It is a field for people who like the mission. As a result, ethical discussions pervade the institution. Do they have the same number of hours? It's hard to say. There are formal curriculum hours for all kinds of things. There are a whole set of issues which became more and more apparent in the last 10, 20 years. Ethical issues, social issues, physician issues, fiscal issues, cultural issues. And so the training of a physician cannot simply be focused on basic sciences and clinical sciences. And medical schools in general have responded to that. In addition, in the hospital, there are a whole roster of ethical. We're just talking about scratching the surface here. Those are important discussions. We have designated people. They're very smart. They're committed. And those become active discussions within the hospital. There's a medical board of all the chiefs. They deal with ethical issues. We have panels that review the behavior of people. These are important issues because the medical profession wants to function in the most responsible way and wants to make sure all its members are doing the same.
That's very reassuring to hear, and I think, I'm sure that it's true. Do you have any advice, just as we end here, for patients, what things that they could do to make sure that they're in good hands?
I think, number one, that they should make sure they get a quality physician. If they're not sure how to do that, I would be inclined to call the major academic medical center or the major health center in their area. Number two, if they suffer from any illnesses or their illnesses in their family, they should become educated consumers. I think the best primary care practitioner is the person himself or herself. Know more about your own health and your potential for disease, and your life course and your health is going to be much better.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pardes,
Nice
for
to talk to
joining
you.
us today. It was great.
Some people think of New York as the world's second home. The City University of New York, with students coming from 90 countries and speaking more than 155 languages, is the world's first university. Find us on the web at cuny.edu or call us at 1-800-CUNY-YES.
Nothing is more Byzantine than our relationship with our doctor. When we choose a financial advisor or a lawyer, it's usually based on word of mouth, not which insurance company they're associated with. We also know surprisingly little about how our doctors are paid for treating us. For example, whether an insurance bureaucrat or a drug salesman has influenced our treatment plan. Yet we want to trust this person to advise us on what are arguably the most important questions of our lives. We ask our doctors to decide how far to go to sustain us and to protect our privacy with our employers, our loved ones, and the government. What can you do about it? Recognize that your doctor, no matter how dedicated, may be conflicted. Be assertive about your care. Ask tons of questions. In the end, that's the only way to protect yourself. For USA Inc., I'm Sarah Bartlett.